Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is Dean Woodbeck from InCommon and Internet 2, and you've joined IAM Online, which is a monthly presentation by InCommon and also sponsored by the EDUCAUSE Higher Education Information Security Council. You're asked to use the chat to pose questions to our speakers today, and you'll find the chat button everybody's probably used too much of Zoom, but the chat button is at the bottom of your screen. And when you open the chat, you'll note that the default is to send a message to all panelists. If you could change that when you send a message to all panelists and attendees, that way everybody can see the question and everybody will see the answer. Without further ado then, I'd like to introduce three colleagues from the University of Illinois, Ed Delaporte, Isaac Galvin, and Keith Wessel, who are going to talk about the Safer Illinois app, which you can see on your screen. So first up is Isaac. Isaac?
Hey, Dean. Thanks for the introduction. My name's Isaac Galvin. I'm the product owner for the Illinois app and by extension, the Safer Illinois app. As a product owner, it's my job to work with the campus community and try to make sure that the application is able to meet all the needs of the campus and that we're able to get our users as much value as possible out of the app and now apps. As you can imagine, COVID-19 was a big impact on a lot of our campuses and a lot of our ability to meet in person and to have a semi normal experience here. But at Illinois, we tried as hard as we can to get our students back here safely and have them be able to meet in person and have instruction and have a semi-normal life through this pandemic. But that required a lot of fast thinking. So here we present a very short version of the Safer Illinois story. Back in March of 2020, we were asked to move to online instruction and remote work. So I remember we were doing this just on a trial basis at our department. We were told, go ahead and we'll try this for a week and see what happens. Well, we went home and the next day they told us, don't come back. They said, we're going to be doing this for a while. And the students were asked to move back home as well. They were asked to leave campus, move out of the residence halls, and not participate in face-to-face activities. At that time, I was not actually a member of the Safer Illinois or the Illinois app team yet. I was still working on some other projects and had applied for an exciting job as a product owner for the Illinois app, but had not even interviewed yet at that point. So a lot of this work was going on behind the scenes by people on different teams and a lot of excitement around that. July of 2020, we announced that rapid on-campus COVID-19 testing was available to all faculty, staff, and students of the University of Illinois at the initial release. See, I joined the team in May, and by July, we were prepared. There was a lot of work that went into developing this test here at the University of Illinois. We retrofitted our vet med diagnostics lab at our veterinary college to be a human specimen handling facility. And we developed a test that can find the presence of the virus in a saliva sample. That's a rather small saliva sample, in fact, just a couple milliliters of saliva are necessary. It's also a very low cost test. Dollars we're talking per test. And we were able to scale it to be able to process. I think at our peak, we had about approximately 15,000 tests in a day being performed here at the university. But to really help students and everyone, but primarily students, get the information that they could as quickly as possible about their testing results and their safety in the community, we developed the Safer Illinois app. And this app really was put together in about 5 or 6 months, and it was a large collaboration. So we'll get to talk about that here in a little bit. Can you have the next slide, please, Dean? We wouldn't have been able to deploy this app if we hadn't spent a lot of time working on what we call the ROKWIRE platform. ROKWIRE is an open source app development mobile software platform that was developed by the University of Illinois. It is available to license to, I believe, any entity at no cost. You can go on a GitHub right now and find most of the building pieces that are required to make our Illinois app and our Safer Illinois app work. That had been in the works for a few years, and we actually debuted the ROKWIRE platform with the Illinois app back in late 2018. The Illinois app has a number of quality of life features for our students on campus, including finding events, finding fun things to do. You can use it to check in to certain places. If you need to scan for access, you can use it to scan for your library items. You can use it to scan into the dining halls. There's a number of features that integrate with our bus system in town. You can get updated information about where the buses are and how long you're going to take to do that. So this was already a massive collaboration with a lot of input from a lot of campus. Because of the architecture, we're able to rapidly integrate new functionality and data sources without having to start from scratch each time. And we hope to make this a privacy first. It's been privacy first in its design, and we like to give the user full control over their data. And this is all in support of our Smart Healthy Communities initiative. This is just one piece. If we could advance to the next slide. Thank you. And the Illinois app, as you can see at the bottom, is the apps on iOS, Android, and web. And they connect through a series of connectors to various cloud building blocks. And those cloud building blocks can talk to different data sources or different capabilities in hosted systems, as well as sensors and IoT devices that we hope to implement around campus and use in various smart ways to help our users have a better university experience. So because we had this platform in place, we were first initially going to build all of this COVID-19 functionality into our main Illinois app. Some of the powers that be at Apple and Google, who are the gatekeepers to their app stores and to all of the phone users out there, decided that they didn't like us intermingling the different functionalities. And if we're going to have health functionality, it needs to be in its own app. And so because of all the hard work done by folks before I even joined the team, we were able to spin it out into its own app and get that approved actually just within a day of when we needed it to be out there released to our users. So it was a very rapid development. Yeah, we were on the edge of our seats the whole time. So now I'd like to tell you a bit about the app and what the experience is like for a user. So if we go to the next slide. As I mentioned, we're in the Google Play and the Apple App Store. Those were big accomplishments. Google Play was actually the harder one to get the approval on. We nearly had to go with an alternate distribution method for our Android app, which would have involved asking your users to sideload an app, and we really didn't want to get into the practice of teaching our users to do that and hoping that they don't install untrusted apps or anything like that. It's also harder to update and just generally harder for findability if you're not in the app store. So we're very happy that we were able to work that out with Apple and Google, and now we're listed in both of those stores. You can go in and search for Safer Illinois. When you first join in, there's some onboarding screens that are going to ask for various system permissions, including notifications and location services. These are required. Location services are required so that you, for our Bluetooth exposure notification system, we'll talk a bit about that more later, but we never actually collect location information. The first screen I highlighted here is the Connect Your NetID screen, and we'll talk a bit more about how that feature works, but we actually do have users log in, and that helps facilitate some of the data exchange we do. The next screen, the second screen on this page here, is the informed consent that we ask of our users. There's two toggle buttons with a deep explanation of what the features are of the application. The first toggle there, which defaults to off, is whether or not they consent to participate in the exposure notification system. We developed our own in-house Bluetooth-based exposure notification system, and we don't default users to having that on because there are some additional concerns about battery and usage and background system processes that we don't make that on by default. But the second one is the healthcare test result provider consent. whether or not they want our system to handle their test results being sent from our on-campus record system. It's called Medicat. It's hosted here by our Student Health Center. And then, so a user has to consent and allow that we're going to handle that test result for them. The next screen is a very important one though, related to that. The next screen is a QR code representation of your COVID-19 encryption key. That is the public-private key pair that's used to encrypt your test results and all the other things that make up your health history in the app while your data is at rest on our servers or on your device. The public part is what's used to sign the results as they're sent from our McKinley system. And then the private part is what's used to decode those test results so that you know you're the only one, or you, if you have multiple phones and are transferring that key to your multiple phones, your phone or phones are the only ones that can actually decrypt that result. So even if someone had access to your identity or found your password and was able to log in, without that secure key, they wouldn't have access to your history. So just one additional layer that we added on top of that when you're providing a service that's handling data for users. And I don't want to know people's test results, so I have no ability to see them. I can't log into any admin system and see whether or not they've been tested positive or negative. Really, our privacy first view of this system has actually made it a little difficult to support because we do have so little visibility into user profile, user activities, the choices that they made during setup. We just don't have access to see those items. So a lot of it is taking their word for it, especially because in these times, it's not like I can meet up with some of these folks and just ask to see their phone. That would be really great, but we can't right now. So after you save your COVID-19 encryption key, in case you're hoping to use more than one device, or if you're upgrading your device or whatever it might be, get yourself a new iPhone 12 Pro Max or whatever, you want to upgrade. Then you're taken to the Safer Illinois home screen. Your first visit to the home screen, it's going to assume that you haven't returned to campus yet. So your next steps there at the top are going to be listed as take a Shield saliva test when you return to campus, and the action that they give you is to find a test location. So can we have the next slide, please? Let's talk a bit about the testing process here at the University of Illinois. So we have in the app, you hit that find test location button, you're presented with this fine list of all the places on campus where you can go get a COVID-19 test. I believe right now we're operating 17 different locations on campus all around. Some of them are only open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Or I'm sorry, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Some are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and some open at 6 a.m. Till 6 p.m. And some locations have weekend coverage as well from 10 to 3. We encourage everybody to go at the time that's best for them and try to space these things out evenly so we have good coverage for not just students but all of our faculty and staff who are asking to come to campus as well. So 17 sites, many of them, this is a photo overlooking our beautiful main quad, and you see the Illini Student Union in the background there, but this is one set up outside of Follinger Hall. And this was an outdoor tent. I believe this one has now moved indoor now that the weather's turning here in Illinois. We went from about 70 degrees out yesterday to about 30 degrees out today. So good old Midwest weather. You never know here in Central Illinois. But that's what the approach to the testing location looks like. Next slide, please. So checking into the app, we actually can use the app as a contactless check-in. You present your QR code that contains some coded information about your university identity number and a couple other pieces of information. And as you can see, the young man there is scanning someone's phone to get their details. And they ask you to verify a few pieces of information. Some of them are very important. Some of the pieces of information they ask you to verify at that time are, of course, your permanent address. So what's your local campus address? and then they ask you for your phone number. And that phone number is very important in the event that you do have a positive test. So we ask every time, we ask people to verify if this phone number is still valid. But we do love, and we found a large percentage of our folks, at first we're using, you can also swipe your iCard, so you can go into your wallet and get your card out and run it across the magnetic card swiper. But as people got used to using the app, we found that a vast majority of students and staff now just use the app, and they like the contactless solution. So hopefully we're training our users some good habits for the future, and helping them move on to the next, our digital interfaces here. So next slide, please. And now the actual test. If you haven't been here to the University of Illinois and seen this yet, it may be a little different than some of the other tests you've seen. I think a lot of the other tests out there are an invasive nasal swab, where they actually put a Q-tip up in your nose and kind of swab around towards the top of your nasal column up there, and it's very uncomfortable. And the one I've done that way, I was able to do myself, but I've heard in a lot of cases someone's doing that for you, and I just don't like the idea of someone else putting a nasal swab up there. So the test that we developed here at the University of Illinois is a saliva-based COVID test, and we have a FDA emergency use authorization to use it here. At first, our students, well, everybody was asked to test twice a week. We did change that to once a week for faculty and staff, but as we'll talk about later on, those plans change in response to different trends. The other nice thing about this saliva-based test is that it doesn't require a skilled healthcare worker. All these people working at these tents are great help, but they don't need a whole lot of training to administer this test and collect the samples. So the cost is very low. The test also doesn't take a whole lot of reagents that are used for the other types of tests. And the test was developed here by our SHIELD team. Next slide, please. So you gave your test, you gave your saliva sample, you spit into the tube. We actually recommend people dribble into the tube, because actually spitting into the tube introduces too much air and agitation. And so we ask people to give saliva as gently as they can. And these days, a typical turnaround time for your test results is within hours. So we're actually at about 6 to 8 hours is what I believe most test results are getting delivered in. Right to your app, in fact. Now, the initial rollout, there was a step where your test results are available in the app, and as well as the patient portal for our medical care record system. That system was not able to scale as well as our Safer Illinois app to meet the demands of transferring tens of thousands of test results to users in a day. So we've actually parallelized the delivery of those things, and it turns out that Safer Illinois is actually the fastest way for a user to be aware of their test results, sometimes hours before the other system can let them know. So that's been a huge victory for us on the app side. When your results come in, you'll get this little message, a notification pop up, very similar to most of the other apps that you've used. You'll see it says you have received a COVID-19 update. Now, we're very careful not to reveal any information, anything that might be personal identifiable information or anything related to health on a lock screen or anything like that. You do have to actually go into the app and using whatever lock mechanism you have for your phone. And then you'll see on the second, on the rightmost screenshot there is your health history, and that's where your test results will show up. This is actually my health history. I took this snapshot yesterday. I went yesterday morning and got a test, and my result was negative. So that's great. But if you notice there, there's a second and a third test result listed, and those are not, the results are not expanded. So you have to actually take a conscious step to expand that result. Just another step that we take to try to make sure that people aren't inadvertently showing someone else their test result when they didn't mean to. The other nice thing this does is after you get your test result, I will see if I go back to the main page, my next steps that said a few slides back, it said get your test result when you return to campus. Now it says that I will turn to orange status or access denied if I don't have another negative test by Wednesday, November 18th. So it gives me some guidance, lets me know when I should be testing again, and when I need to actually go submit the sample so that I have my test result back before that date. Now, if it were to get to Thursday, November 19th, and I haven't had a test again yet, my status would change to building access denied. And we'll, if I could go to the next slide, please. And yeah, building access. So that's one of the main features of this app is the wellness support associates. You see the woman there masked up and standing in front of a building entry. We've got a whole group of folks who are called wellness support associates. And they stand at campus building entrances, and they have that they make sure that anyone coming by has an appropriate building entry status. You can see mine there shows building access granted. So even though I'm working from home, I am about a 7-minute drive from campus. And so if I so desired to go into campus and enter one of these buildings or go to my office to pick up something I might have left there or some mail or something, I can do that. And we do have to go through a particular entrance to the building, even though my access scan card will let me into many entrances. Our policies are you have to go through the proper entrance at least once per day that you visit campus to due diligence and show that you are participating in campus testing. I see a question. Does the application require that the user's device have a PIN passcode before showing test results? That's a great question. I'm not sure if we've required that, but that's a great suggestion, and we can look into that. So thank you for the question. And then, yeah, the other exciting feature about this is the exposure notification system. It's a privacy preserving Bluetooth based exposure notification system that we actually developed here at the University of Illinois. It is voluntary, and it works very similarly to the one that Apple and Google have unleashed in their latest operating system versions. Ours is tuned for a particular effectiveness. So our thresholds are set for 2 hours of continuous exposure to someone who later tests positive for COVID-19 within the last 14 days. Now, some apps do 15 minutes, some apps do, if you've been within contact with someone for 15 minutes, we opted for a more strict because we want this to have meaning. If a user gets this kind of contact or exposure notification, we want them to take it very seriously. We want to reduce the number of false exposure notification flags as much as possible. So while some people think it's a little lenient, this is just one of many things that we're doing to make this system work. But this piece in particular, we wanted to really have some weight. So next slide, please. And then the last portion here is quarantine and isolation support. So this is something that's evolved over the time. In the initial release, if you got a positive test result, your status turned red and you were told you were denied building access entry, but we didn't provide much more guidance. Over time, we found that since the app was the most effective, fastest, and potentially the only way that a lot of our users were seeing their test results, opting not to log into the patient portal because they got it in the app, they were maybe missing out on other guidance. So we've amended our next steps. You can see that first case there is if they have a positive test result, and we have in very big letters, you have been placed in mandatory isolation, as well as very many guidances follow that up, including stay home, do not go to work, school, or public areas, separate yourself from others in your home, and then some ideas about who you need to contact and who can release you from this isolation once you're done. But this has proven to be a very effective mechanism for communicating to students what they should do. We received a number of complaints and not necessarily complaints, but comments that students were getting their positive diagnosis and then they didn't know what to do after that. So we've been building on this message over time. And as you can see, each of those cases are a little different. If you've tested positive, or if you've been subject to a quarantine because of a contact trace, someone who the contact tracing, the manual of the human-based contact tracing. We also have the exposure notification guidance. And then lastly is the message you receive when you're released from isolation or quarantine, letting you know that you can resume your daily activities, but you should participate in regular testing once again. So in a nutshell, those are the features of Safer Illinois. And now I will pass it on to Keith to talk about some of the work and ways that his team contributed.
So Isaac, good stuff. For the identity geeks on the call who are expecting amazing things from my slides for what we did, I'm going to disappoint you. At least I think I'm going to disappoint you, because the development team on this did such a stellar job interfacing with the systems we already had in place. So, but here's what we did do for those of you interested from an identity and access management perspective to make it easy for these developers to have things to interface with. For starters, authentication. For those of you who know me, I'm part of our identity and access management team. I'm one of our service managers here for the Urbana campus. And many of you have heard me prattle on about Shibboleth and its various wonders and merits. That's one of my big pieces of my responsibility here. And they were able to leverage our Shibboleth IDP for authentication for both the Illinois and the Safer Illinois app. The apps are both leveraging the OIDC extension for the Shibboleth IDP, which I might have this date wrong. I thought we put it into production August of last year, but since 2020 has seemed like it's about 5 years long, it might have been August of 2018. Isaac, when you said a minute ago that the Illinois app went into production in 2018, I might have that off.
Right, Keith. I think it was 2019. I believe you're right. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good. I like I said, this year's been a very long year, so I wasn't quite sure. But that extension is the magic behind the authentication. I originally talked with the developers about considering using ECP, which some of you who are more familiar with the intricacies of Shibboleth that you already know, but that's a non-browser auth extension for SAML that the Shibboleth IDP supports. But it was going to be much cleaner for the mobile app world to use OIDC. We were already hoping to get the OIDC extension in, so we went ahead and did that, and it was just in time for the Illinois app, and gosh, it was convenient that it was out there when we added the Safer Illinois app. There were only a couple of non-standard, and they weren't very non-standard, things that we had to do to make this work for mobile apps. One of the big ones was adjusting the refresh token lifetime for any of the mobile clients so that they could use that refresh token and users didn't have to log in nearly as often. That was one that we carefully evaluated with security staff, and it made sense with the safeguards they had in place in the app to do that. So we went ahead and turned that up. The nice thing about the way the extension's built is it was really easy to do that just by doing a relying party override for these clients. And then the other thing that we had to do was releasing group memberships in the form of the is member of attribute or claim if you're speaking OIDC speak. And we didn't want to release all of the group memberships of anybody to this app. So we wanted to do a subset of that, and that was best done manually. Now I'm told, and Scott Cantor's Shibboleth quarter or monthly update that came out earlier this week sort of confirms this, that some of the functionality coming out in Shibboleth will make the handling of OIDC metadata, client registrations, more like SAML metadata, which will make changes like this much easier. Right now, we've just got a long list of client IDs, which we're allowing these clients to be registered using dynamic client registration. So they're long, ugly strings of characters for client IDs. And anytime a new client is added to this family of apps, whether it's for dev or testing or production, we need to add that to our IDP configuration. It's not very often, but it's still a bit of manual work. I'd like to do some more metadata driven configuration for this to automate it and make it so we just have to add something in one place, and boom, that refresh token lifetime is extended, the right group memberships are released, and everything will just work. But other than that, this is made for a very seamless authentication flow. Users are used to seeing our Shibboleth authentication flow. Any of the bells and whistles that we already have in there with multi-factor authentication through Duo and with user attribute release consent are still popped up there as part of the authentication process, even in the app. So they're used to seeing that. It has all of the security and consent mechanisms that we worked so hard to get in place, still part of the login flow for these apps. So that was a nice experience for us and for the users. The other half of this was authorization. And authorization wise, obviously anyone from the Illinois community is authorized to use these apps, but then there are specific administrative privileges, access to different areas behind the scenes in the app that are managed by groups. Well, also just in time, we put Grouper into production about a year ago. We branded it as Authorization Manager, or Authman. And Authman is running in AWS using the i2 Trusted Access Platform container, shameless plug here. And it is driving a lot of our groups and our authorization right now. We've been slowly moving things over to it from just using raw Active Directory groups. However, Shibboleth is still consuming those groups directly from Active Directory. It's not talking to Grouper to pull that data. So the way it works is the app owners have their own folder inside Grouper, where they can do whatever they need hierarchy-wise to build these groups, structure them based off of other groups as needed, if they want to have some hybrid groups. And then those groups get pushed out to a specific spot in Active Directory, which is our attribute source for Shibboleth. And we leveraged a regular expression, a prefix of the distinguished name of those groups to know which groups are for the ROKWIRE family of apps. And if it fits those prefixes, that prefix, pardon me, then we know that that group is relevant for those apps, and it gets released as part of the is member of claim to the apps, and they can work their magic there. So it all came together, again, using pieces we already had in place. We did a little training with them on Grouper, and the rest just sort of worked itself out. So that was all nice. There were, of course, other privacy and similar pieces to work through as this thing was rolling out. And for that, I'm actually going to hand off to Ed.
We got one question for you, Keith, before we do that.
Sure.
And then it looks like a couple for Isaac. Is there a way to expire the OIDC refresh tokens early, as in when the user changes their password?
There has been some interesting discussion about that. Those refresh tokens are, gosh, this question was asked on the Shibboleth users list a few weeks back, I believe, maybe a couple of months back. And I think the answer to that was no. I'm not remembering any way to expire those refresh tokens. I know we've discussed this. And I think there have been some feature requests put in to the OIDC extension, if I remember correctly. But at this point, the answer is no. So if those credentials did get compromised somehow, we would need to take some other actions on that.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you, Keith. And then Isaac, I think you can see the questions there from Jeffrey Sessler.
Yeah, hey, thank you for that. And Jeffrey, I see your question. You're asking about the Shield T3 testing service, and I understand it comes with a safer app. Now, I work with Shield. I don't work for Shield, so I can't speak for them completely, but this is the app code is part of the package. It is, in fact, anyone today can go and we're a completely open source. So whether you go through the whole solution or not, you have access to the code and the ability to use any of the part of what we created, including our custom exposure notification system that's different from Apple Google's. Actually, if you look at the latest pull requests and that public GitHub repo, I hear today that our students and faculty members who've been working on that have made a great improvement in the power utilization in terms of how we do that on iOS. So the latest pull request out there is very it's a deep change, but it should be a great one once we get that incorporated. But yeah, we're really excited about the fact that the app is completely open source. The other question was about daily symptoms check-in in the app. We do have that. That feature is available. I chose not to highlight it today just because we have limited time, but that feature is in the app. We don't. I've seen some other apps prompt users every day to check, and enter their symptoms. We don't do anything like that. It is completely private and only visible to yourself. Those symptoms are never sent anywhere or transmitted to anyone else. So it's really just kind of a tool for personal usage. So.
Okay, and then we've got actually a couple more questions for you, Keith. One is, did you consider any other IDP proxies such as CI logon for the OIDC claims?
No, we didn't. We wanted to try and, well, actually, there was a little bit, I take that back. There was a little bit early on, before we had the OIDC piece in place, they were actually doing some beta of this using CI logon. We wanted to make it as short of a path as possible for authentication, as few of moving pieces as possible. Nothing against CI logon. It's a very stable platform and obviously used by all sorts of things. But we wanted to try and keep it as simple as we could. And the fact that we could do it all straight to the IDP was a much cleaner way for us to do it.
Okay, and one more, and then we'll move on to Ed. What sort of groups were built to be consumed by the application? In other words, what do those groups authorize or deny?
I'm going to actually pass that to Isaac. I wonder if that might come up. Yeah, I can mention that. So the major one that I concern myself with is of course access to the debug panel. The app has a debug panel that has a few features that aren't available to all users. So that is a big important one. But we also use it for the Safer Illinois app and the Illinois app. Those are the end user counterparts, but we have a separate app that's for administration of the platform. So if you need to update the testing location intents or the wait time becomes extended and we want to mark that there, or if the hours change or something closes because of lightning, we have an authorization group that is just for location managers. So as long as those people are members of those group, someone logs into the admin app, they will have a limited view to just what they need to be able to do to get their job done. So those are just two places, but we've got more coming in the future, I know.
Okay, Ed, over to you.
All right. Oh, hey, there's my slide. Thanks. I want to speak to, Isaac highlighted what happened. And I think there's an old episode of I Love Lucy where a bunch of guys are standing in a row and the drill sergeant asks who wants to volunteer for the dirty work. And suddenly everybody but one guy steps back and he looks like he volunteered. That's kind of how the ROKWIRE team felt when campus brought them this challenge. So I want to talk a little bit about, how do we take on this kind of unprecedented privacy and security challenge and do it, within the extended month of March that we're all experiencing this year. And really the key was work done beforehand, before we ever got to this point. And there a lot of work happened building relationships between IAMU, cybersecurity, and the different development teams involved. The cybersecurity team at Illinois has always had a mantra that we're collaborators, we're not cops. We're not here to slap anybody's hand for doing the wrong thing. We're here to make the right thing easier to do and make a better path to it. And that became really important when it was, whatever happens, there's lives at stake. This has to go live. And by the way, let's hope we don't alienate all of our pretty privacy sensitive, modern young students while we're at it. And if we hadn't had that relationship and that pre-existing setup, we couldn't have done all this. In particular, the agile friendly practices, we beat that agile development drum mostly for financial reasons, but lately it's become a privacy and security thing. It matters how fast a security patch can make it into production. We can't have a lot of slow, bad processes for things. We recently campus rolled out GitHub Enterprise, and thankfully a lot of our teams that we needed who were key for this were actually early adopters already. And so that was a huge help. As Isaac just talked about, we know what's going on, and it's out there in the world, right? It's pull requests and all that, but even before it was fully open source, they invited cybersecurity in, they invited anybody who wanted to collaborate across campus in, and we had a place to work together. Also, cybersecurity staff are attending our sprint meetings. We're there to, we're in the trenches with folks. What's my other note on this? But then the key thing is the ROKWIRE framework was sitting here as a privacy-centric design system. I talk about this too much, but we talked about delivering hot dogs 2 years ago in the ROKWIRE framework. We said, look, if you do privacy right, when you're getting a hot dog to reach somebody and you say, I want your location for the next 20 minutes till the hot dog gets to you so that if you get up and change seats, it'll still get there. We thought if we do that right, we'll build a relationship and people will believe us when we say, give us something sensitive, this is what we're doing with it. And we're not delivering hot dogs. we're delivering life-saving tests. And actually, thank you, Isaac. Your slide did briefly show Rockwall. We glossed a little bit over what we can see and what we can't. And as Isaac said, it's actually pretty inconvenient for us on the administrative side. But we have components in the system that we call Rockwall generally that keep our own people from seeing things that we can just say, look, we don't have this. It's only unencrypted on your phone. And it's built the trust we need. We've got the adoption we need. Next slide, please. Let's see. Oh, I just wanted to highlight, this is really two completely different privacy experiences built into one app. The exposure notification system, we don't see that. That data is moving in impressive and secured ways through even secure computing clouds and such. And then the testing center, we need to know who you are because as Isaac said, we're checking your phone number every single time you check in with us so that we can reach you later. And this really only works because we had privacy-centric analysis and privacy-centric design back when we were trying to deliver hot dogs. And then, I think we're back to you, Isaac. This is your slide next. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're kind of overlapping a little bit here, Ed, but thanks for the handoff. And yeah, we do want to emphasize, as Ed said, that this has been built from the ground up for privacy first. Any of your health data, and not just in Safer Illinois, but in the Illinois app, any of your personally identifiable data is all encrypted, and you're the only person allowed access to it. We de-identify things as much as we can, and there is a concept of profiles that are, they have a unique identifier that's just for you. And so only you're able to retrieve the bit of data that powers the whole system. We spent a lot of time working with a lot of really bright minds here on our privacy policy. I think it's a very brilliant document, very easy to read and understand. There'll be some links later where you'll be able to find that. But we've got a great committee of folks headed up by Ed's boss's boss. I think it's a number of layers up, but our chief privacy officer here, Joe Barnes, and a number of legal scholars that work here for the university have reviewed our privacy stance and helped us with drafting that document. They've also taken input from a number of concerned groups on campus, academic groups, faculty groups, employee groups, who have questioned, and rightfully so. They've scrutinized our platform, and we appreciate it. But everything from deep code review and analysis of how our exposure notification system works, and helping us pinpoint any potential vulnerabilities that might have come out of the way we implemented, as well as helping us with mitigation strategies. It's all been on the table. Everything from the professionals and EDS group to undergraduate students who are submitting secure, responsible disclosures of any issues that they've found in the application. We've received so much input, and I think that's only possible because of our open source stance. So we're very excited about that, and having anyone be able to have visibility into what we're doing with their data. Most importantly well, not most importantly, but also very important, is you can remove your data from the system at any time. So we do allow anyone who wants to no longer participate in Safer Illinois or any of the ROKWIRE based apps, if that's the Illinois app as well. They can remove their data from the system completely at any time. There's no wait, there's no threshold for your data removal. You hit the button and it's done. And you could actually read that in the code and verify what we're deploying is the same, and know that it works. So that's been a great piece of functionality for that. I could address some of the questions in the chat. I'm not sure they're all showing up for everybody, but there was a question from Brett asking, so not the allow building access group. So there's not a group for allowing building access, and I responded without him seeing, but without everybody seeing the question maybe, but how building access is calculated, it's actually done on the device using that personal information, the private information that's in your health history. I showed earlier my 3 test results. There's a couple of other actions that can be added in there. If you're placed into quarantine by our county health department, that would be an action in your health history. And based on whether or not you've been released from quarantine with a subsequent action, and then whether you've had another test after that release from quarantine, that's what's going to calculate your building access. So we've developed a flexible set of rules that consume all of the information that's available only to the user on their phone, that will calculate building access. So there isn't a building access group, and there isn't really an ability to override that either. You need to do your part, and I can't tell if you've been tested or not. You've got to do it. So that's been really great. Jeffrey asked, are there any alternative onboarding options, say for grounds or dining that rarely use their credentials? So we could touch on this a bit later. Everybody on our campus does have, even part-time and affiliate employees do have credentials to log into the network. So they have credentials to log into Safer Illinois. We do have an affiliate identity program where we're able to give people who are regular visitors to campus, if that's vendors or other kind of consultants who work with us, or nearby businesses who are going to be meeting with us regularly, maybe need access to some of our other services that are behind authentication, authorization. We're able to create affiliate IDs for them. But we've actually developed a new feature that I'll talk about a little bit later that will allow us to expand to even more members of our community without having to create a net ID and password for every one of them. So Keith, did you want to add something?
I was going to circle back just a second to the refresh token revocation. If anyone is interested, Jim Fox actually asked about that on the SHIB users list back on May 13th. And there is a way for a relying party to call an OAuth 2 token revocation endpoint, which could be leveraged for revoking things. It would have to be prompted by an RP though, which makes it of minimal use. But I think since that question was asked, Isaac, we probably should talk later about the ability to do this, possibly if a password's compromised. So I just wanted to, if somebody wanted more information on that, feel free to look at the SHIB users list archive.
All right, thanks, Keith. And there was one more question from Jeffrey. He asked for the building access pass, do we have any anti-fraud built in? So We actually do. And what you can't see in that static screenshot is there's around my photo. There's a ring, and that ring actually is in motion on the screen device. So there is a visible piece of that. And then at the top, there's a header, and that is a color of the day. So that rotates colors every day. And our wellness support associates, they're aware of what the color of the day should be. And they do look for that. And I have heard tell of people being turned away because their color is not the appropriate color of the day, or there's no motion in their ring. We have had incidences of students sharing on Snapchat that they think they've found ways to circumvent the system. But I can tell you, based on the usage numbers and our anonymous analytics that we collect, a vast majority of our campuses doing things the right way. We wouldn't have people entering buildings if everybody was faking it. We have over 40,000 active weekly users. And so we are most definitely penetrating a large percentage of our campus community. So there is anti-fraud built in, and I think it's a very, very small percentage of our students. And I will say that the Office of Student Conflict Resolution has tracked down a number of those folks, and they have received disciplinary charges for sharing and spreading information about how to circumvent, in their belief, circumvent the system. They're really only hurting themselves. So great question, though. Thank you. Go to the next slide. But the Safer Illinois app is just one piece of the puzzle. This has been a massive collaboration between a lot of departments on campus. Technology services is a big contributor as the owners and operators of the system and the question of the system and the app and the infrastructure. We manage the infrastructure on AWS. We manage a lot of the support pieces, the questions that come in for tech support. Our help desk answers that. But a good amount of our development came from the NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications here on the University of Illinois. They also help us a lot with the application development and management of GitHub and doing the builds and working with the security team as well, Ed and his team. The College of Electrical and Computer Engineering has developed portions of the app, notably the notification, exposure notification system. We've had contributions from a lot of other groups on campus. But it's also turned into a fun kind of academic process too, where we're working with a couple classes who are going to contribute to this project as part of their classwork, and they're turning it into coursework to submit localizations and language translations. So very cool stuff. We have Shield T3, as mentioned earlier. That is our campus program for modeling student behavior during the pandemic. As well as helping to target groups of concern and help get them the testing resources they needed and keeping them on target for staying healthy. Shield Team 30 is a team we had to spin up partway through our deployment. Shield Team 30 is a group whose primary charge is to, when someone gets a positive test, we want to reach that student within 30 minutes and get a verbal confirmation that they know that they have tested positive and they know their next steps. Early on, some students said, "Oh, I got tested positive and no one contacted me for 4 or 5 days." So we spun up Shield Team 30 in an event to an attempt to get those reports taken care of. Shield Surge is able to help pinpoint trouble spots down to individual residences, apartment buildings, people in a specific. Well, we've not seen much of transfer in classes, but potentially it could be people in a specific class if there's an outbreak. But I know that they're really a big help. Student affairs and housing are part of this puzzle. We've got quarantine dorms set up for students who test positive so they can resume their campus life. But we have a lot of support from the College of Vet Med, from the Institute for Genomic Biology, the diagnostics labs, Department of Chemistry, Department of Physics. All of these folks are involved, and they're the people who I get to work with every day. So it's very exciting. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, we're running out of time here. So lessons first, lessons learned, a couple things we learned here is privacy first was a huge win for us. I mean, that we gained the trust of a lot of people in this process, and I think that it's been a very successful deployment. Test your messaging in the app with real users. We turned this app around so quickly that the initial version had some fairly troubling wording regarding your status if you hadn't been tested yet. The polite message now that says return, get a test when you return to campus was not so polite on our initial release, and actually caused a lot of fear in our users. So they thought they were potentially exposed because they hadn't been tested yet. So make sure that users are aware of what they're going to see and what the words mean. App Store approvals can be lengthy. We made it barely under wire. Expect a lot of questions at launch. This app, the Illinois app, was a fairly lackluster launch, but the Safer Illinois app, we had over 10% to this day, over 10% of our questions the day the mass mail went out announcing the app. And so there was a lot of questions and a lot of downloads and a lot of issues on that first day. And so just expect that. I did see a question about not all users have smartphones. So we approach this in a number of different ways, but I think the most interesting one we have is we actually spun up a program for any student or staff member to receive a phone that's managed by the university that is locked down to be able to participate in Safer Illinois for building access and exposure notification. And those are given out on a semester-long term, a loan term, which can be renewed, of course. And so we're trying to get those devices into the hands of everyone that we can. Remain flexible with all the situation updates. I mean, we've gone through so many different permutations of the rules and helping pinpoint problem communities. At first, all of our faculty, staff, and students were to test twice a week. We kind of rolled that back to only undergraduate students have to test twice a week, everybody else once a week. Well, due to a surge of things here in Illinois, we've actually had to change that guidance back now. So starting tomorrow evening, all faculty and staff will have to test twice a week again to maintain building access. We've actually also been able to pinpoint smaller groups in our flexible rules engine. We have a way to say that a group of folks, usually designated by a list of university ID numbers, have to test every other day because they're in a residence hall or an apartment building that's seen an outbreak. So just keep in mind that to stay flexible and that the rules are going to change, and your modelers and your really smart pandemic watching people are going to have ideas of how this technology is going to need to evolve, and it's going to have to. Yeah, you can't be static about this. So next slide, please. What's next? We've got a more detailed testing plan in terms of that flexibility. When students come back for spring, we actually had to build a new rule that says you need to have 2 negative tests at least 3 days apart before you're going to be allowed to have building access. And we want that for the spring term. That's what our modelers and our statisticians have asked for. So we've built that into the app. We're hoping to expand to more community testing. So we're piloting a version now that will, beta testing a version now that will include this facility called rosters that will allow us to have external people who are validated by their phone number to be able to sign in to testing and get their results via the app without necessarily having to have a university account. And then expanding to other communities and campuses via ROK Metro. ROK Metro is our organization that helps. It's a university-owned group that helps other schools and communities bring this to their testing to their campus or community. Next slide, please. I've included a number of resources here. The Safer Illinois website, the university's COVID website. We have a really intriguing testing dashboard that shows that just yesterday we reached over 750,000 tests processed here on campus. The next link after that is part of our COVE course. It's a multidisciplinary course that's talking about the university's approach to the pandemic. Part 8 there was the panelists were Bill Sullivan and Sanjay Patel, who are 2 of our faculty leads that I have the pleasure of working with every day, and very bright guys. So I suggest checking that out. The University of Illinois' YouTube stream has a number of videos about our campus response and how we've managed here. Safer Illinois GitHub is a great place to watch for changes. If you're a podcast fanatic like I am, the Rising to the Challenge podcast has had some great content. They're about 4 episodes in, but they're talking about our university systems response to COVID-19 as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Isaac, and great presentation, and of course, a very, very timely topic. So thanks to you, thanks to Keith, and thanks for Ed for your time and for this presentation. And thanks to everyone else for attending today's IAM Online. Have a good rest of your day.